The Christian Association for Survivors of Suicide Loss is pleased to present our podcast, Reaching for Hope with Joy Osborne. Let's join Joy and her guests as they discuss topics of relevance for emotional and spiritual wellness.
Welcome back to our podcast, Joy and Friends, as we continue our conversation. So when we talk about financial, we talk about the abuse, we talk about as Christians wanting to stay. What was that defining moment to leave, to say, I'm done?
My best friend of many years, we ended up sharing a old 2-story house. I had the top and she had the bottom. She knew what was going on.
Oh, gotcha.
A little bit. But again, we're going about our own lives.
So you got out of that relationship eventually? You moved out? First, or did you get it?
I had enough courage, asked him to leave.
So Heather,
I actually left once. And as the judge puts it, in the cloak of darkness. I hate that term, actually. We had prepared, I called my parents and we had set it all up. So when he left one day, my parents were down the street. They had driven from Missouri. Oh, wow. He was going to be at a conference all day. So as soon as he left, I called him, told him the coast was clear. I grabbed all the kids, put them in the van, and we spent the next 2 days driving back to Missouri. My parents had a finished basement that we stayed in, and it was okay for me to stay in Missouri at the time. The judge had granted it, but there had to be Zoom. It wasn't Zoom at the time. It was something else, but it was like Zoom video calling. And that's how he got me back. He was talking to the kids and he said, "Can I say hi to your mother? I just want to say hi to her." And I got in the screen and it started back again. "I miss you. I love you. My life isn't complete without you. I've really messed up. I promise. And it's just one thing after another. And then this is how sneaky he is. He had me do what I did to him, he had me do to my parents. So how I was just as sneaky with him, getting away with my family, he made me be just as sneaky. So he had planned this whole thing for when my parents went to church. I was to fake that I was sick. And when they went off to church, he showed up. We all got in the vehicle. We flew back to Florida. In the plane, he looked at me and he said, "That will be the last time you leave me." And he took all the birth certificates and he took all the Social Security cards. And he goes, "You will never leave me again."
Wow.
In the airplane as we landed in Florida.
Wow. That just brings me back. For you, I know you probably had to fear what happens next.
Yeah. Oh,
what happens next?
So I thought it was all over at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, this is it. I'm going to be with this man for the rest of my life.
Or he's going to kill me.
That's the fear.
Or I'm going to kill myself.
Right. I think about the time we argued over my daughter, something stupid, and we were downstairs. We had the garage at the time, because I rented. We never owned anything, and this was an old 2-story, and the landlord had a bunch of her stuff in the garage, so I didn't even know what was really in there. And we were in the garage, and we're arguing, and I'm just like, "Look, one of these days, just don't you go to sleep. Just don't you go to sleep." Like I knew what I was going to do.
Right.
But apparently there was like a machete on the wall, and he takes it off the wall. I'm holding my daughter in my arms and he just points it at my throat and says, "Just don't you go to sleep. Wow. Don't you go to sleep."
That's terrible.
And you don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And again, you think, where's God?
Yeah.
Right.
Why? What did I do? Why is it, you're so weak-minded, you think, at that point in time because you're broken.
Yeah, you're broken. And I remember I did that a lot. I prayed a lot, but I eventually got out. I did leave for the second time, and I did it on my own. I actually called a women's shelter.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And spoke to them, and they immediately, after telling them my story, said, "You've got to get yourself and those kids out of there." Well, I waited a couple days, and by the time I called back, they were full. So I just said, "You know what, guys? We're late. We're leaving." And I grabbed one suitcase and I grabbed whatever I could to put in that one suitcase. I got in the vehicle that we had, and we took off, and we had a family friend over in Tampa. And I went to my divorce lawyer first, signed the papers, went to him in Tampa, and I said, I need a place to be with my kids. And I called my sister. She wired me some money at Walmart. I said, the kids haven't eaten. I literally just grab and go. I have nothing. I had no money to my name. I had nothing other than this car. And that's how I left.
And God is taking care
and then God. And then God.
Yeah. So within these situations, I know we talked a little bit about this. What made us stay? Let's revisit that for just 1 minute. What made us stay? For me, it was, as a Christian, I wanted to have a family. I didn't want to have a divorce, so on and so forth. So what, for you guys, what were the main factors there for you? Why did you stay?
Mine was biblical. I feel like the Bible actually lays out about divorce, and I felt like mine didn't fit. And I didn't. God hates divorce. So that just kept ringing in my head. God hates divorce. Heather, you got to stay. You got to figure this out.
Gotcha. What about you, Beth? What kept you staying?
Insecurity.
Okay.
I come from a divorced family. Ironically, my mom and dad divorced twice. They got married. My mom had already had my brother and my sister. She had been divorced once, met my dad. They got together, had me married. They divorced, and my mom remarried. Long story short. And then my mom divorced that man, and then my mom and dad got back together again.
Wow.
So I think for me, it was insecurity. I didn't want to be the same thing that my parents had been through. I can fix this. This isn't, all the things. And my weak ideas, I didn't know God as much as I know him now. I knew who God was. I had went to church as a child. I had somebody take me to Bible school. The kindness of the neighbors that took me to Bible school. I knew who Jesus was. I just didn't know him as well as I know him now.
Yeah, that's good. There's another aspect of domestic violence that I'd like to touch on, and that is spiritual abuse. And what is that? That is somebody using the Bible against us, right? And trying to make it, well, God doesn't want you to do this, or you should love me because of whatever. And I know I ran into that a lot, where my spouse at the time was saying, we agreed we'd never have divorce, and you'd never do this, and you'd never do that. They bring up different scriptures, and actually one Christmas he bought me books on how to be a better wife.
Wow. So
that was interesting.
Wow.
So I don't know if any of you ran into any spiritual abuse, and if so, how did that affect you, and how did you respond?
I wished I, had more spirituality in my life at the time. So now I can't really say the spiritual abuse came into effect in there.
Right.
I probably could have used a little more of it at the time.
My ex used to just pick things out of the Bible and just kind of make it, take it out of context, make it what he wanted, it says here that you're supposed to love me,
right.
Or you're supposed to, Christ loved the church. And he just pick things apart. And what's interesting is that I was so involved in the church, and I knew that those things weren't true. But after we had been married, I was married for 11 years. It's funny how you grow so apart from God, but yet I was screaming, where are you?
Right.
Where are you? I need you. Help me get out of this. Because I was thinking God hates divorce. So I was like, well, God, make something happen so that I can get out for my kids and for myself so that we can be safe. And I just felt like I was standing there just, what do I do? What do I do?
Right.
And God spoke to me one day. I was in the shower, and I was just, of course, bawling. One of the many times I bawled in the shower because I didn't want him to see me crying. because that would show a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be in the shower just bawling, help me.
Mm.
And he spoke to me and he said, there's the door.
Oh, wow.
Walk through it. And I'm like, I'm literal. You mean the front door, Lord? Which door are we talking about?
Shut the door, I'm out.
Yeah. And I kept saying, well, he said if I leave, I can leave, but I can't leave the kids. I can't leave. And he's like, there's the door. Walk through the door, Heather.
That's great.
That is what I'm trying to show you. And soon after that is what we talked about when I said I just grabbed the kids, grabbed the suitcase, and we walked out the door.
That's great. Well, I wanted to share, how God showed up one time in my situation. And it was very unique. I was at work one day and I'm sitting there and I hear somebody, a lot of runners where I worked, and they said, yeah, I went running the other day and my number was 1313. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So then I went out to dinner that night with a friend and the bill came up to be $13.13. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So that night I had decided to go to a women's shelter. So I went to the women's shelter and guess what room I got? I got room 13. So as soon as I got in the room, I'm like, okay, God, what's with 13? And I want to read this. It's Psalms. He told me, he said, read Psalms 13. So this one is forever, very special to me. And I want to read it real quick. It's in the NLT. It says, oh Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you look the other way? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, O Lord, my God. Restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, we have defeated him. Don't let them rejoice at my downfall. But I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. And I read that and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. Wow. And I'm like, God, you were speaking to me, because sometimes when we're going through trouble, sometimes we don't think we hear God. Now, Heather, you heard God, right? We heard God. And sometimes we don't hear like fast enough or what we want to hear, right, at times. But I'll tell you, through this process, God really directed me. Was it painless? No. But I can say that through this process, grabbing onto God, I became stronger.
Yeah.
Some may not understand that. How can you become strong in a difficult situation? But it's just, we were never promised in this world that it would be perfect. That's only heaven. And what we can do here on earth is stay close to God.
Yeah.
Even though all around us, it may not look like anything's changing, but sometimes God's wanting to change us as well, through that process. So I think it's really cool, though, Heather, going back to your story, that God did direct you, taking that step. That's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
Taking that first step. And I wanted to share a couple things. Some people might be listening saying, well, that's fine and good, but what do I do? What are some suggestions for me who are living in the domestic violence situation? And there's a few things I was, reading through and looking at. And one is a safety plan. What are you going to do to be safe, right? Places you can go. I know, Heather, you went to a shelter. I went to a shelter. We went to friends' homes, where it is, we can go. There is a national domestic violence hotline also that you can call. I didn't know if people know about that. It's 800-799-SAFE, 800-799-7233. Or you can text START to 88788. So that is a starting point for some people who may be struggling in that area. You can reach out for help to family members, like I said, and others. Legal protection, I think, Heather, you mentioned that as well, that, went to the lawyer. You can get a restraining order. Sure. Whatever it might be, seek legal counsel, get a lawyer. It's emergency services. The big thing is document the abuse. Sometimes people don't do that.
I actually did that.
Did you?
I kept a diary after I left the first time and went back. My mom had given me a notebook. It was just so random. It's crazy how things work out in the long run. But she had given me a notebook and said, oh, I found this. I thought of you. And it was just empty. And when I went back, I used that notebook and I started documenting everything that was happening. And I do still have it to this day. I don't know what I'll be doing with it moving forward. But I did document a lot of things.
That's great. Also consider counseling and therapy. We've talked about this many times in our podcast and in our small groups that we have, that, it's okay to get help.
Yeah.
As Christians sometimes, and I grew up, I don't know about you guys and where you went to church, but I grew up in an era when you got to have faith and you don't need other people and this, that, and the other. And I'd have to say that's a lie, because yes, you got to have faith. No doubt, as Christians, we got to let God direct and guide us. But we've gone through some traumatic experiences here, and getting help from others is not a bad thing.
Also, too, Joy, just reaching out to that one person that you do trust. We
That's
all
true.
have that one person.
Right.
I know
Right.
we do.
Right.
And just having them to confide in and just asking them, have you noticed anything?
Right.
And I feel like I'm going crazy here. Have you noticed any red flags? Have you,
That's good.
just get another person's opinion on something. And
Exactly.
I think that they will, because
help
I
you.
did that a few times in
Yeah.
my situation. I would pull somebody aside and
Mhm.
sometimes they'd say, oh my gosh, thank God you said something.
Oh, good.
I didn't want to say anything. I don't want to pry, but I did
Mhm.
notice a few things. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not going crazy. Because when you're in it,
Right.
you're just in this like bubble.
Right.
So,
Right.
Well, and your friends don't want to say anything,
right.
because, or maybe they do,
Mm.
and they just don't know how.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. When you're going through it, your loved ones see things that you don't,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and they don't want to hurt your feelings. If you, at some point, you're already hard on yourself,
Mhm.
because, like I said, you're taking it all in.
Mhm.
You feel like you have to absorb it all because you're blaming yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's
Yeah.
true. There were some things that were said when we were talking about spiritual abuse, and I wanted to just bring in some Bible verses. I'm not taking these out of context. These are things that the Bible actually says about violence and such. Ephesians 5:25-28 says, husbands are instructed to love their wives as Christ loved the church, meaning with selflessness and sacrifice. Abuse of any kind is incompatible with the command to love.
Wow.
That is so true. Colossians 3:19 says, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. The verse condemns mistreatment within marriage and calls for kindness and respect, right? 1 Peter 3:7, husbands are called to treat their wives with honor and understanding, recognizing them as equal partners in life. So they're not above us, they're not towering above us. Now, they're spiritual leaders, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we're supposed to be respectful of one another in relationships. Psalms 11:5, the Lord abhors violence, and those who act violently are not in alignment with God's will. So the things we've talked about are violence. Abuse
Yes.
is violence.
Yeah.
Verbal abuse, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know it says husbands, but it's also we're to submit. But you can't submit to abuse.
Right.
That's not what God's wanting. God's wanting us to live in a healthy relationship. So I wanted to ask a question. So how, we are all remarried. So how did you guys adjust to your current marriages, the relationships, and the shame, leaving shame behind? And how did you process that and deciding to marry again?
When I first left, my parents had actually found the church that I'm currently at. So I jumped right in and immediately went into divorce care.
Oh, okay.
I joined, I think, 3 or 4 small groups. I was doing something every night.
Right.
I mean, just something to try to get
Mhm.
myself back on track
Mhm.
because there was so much damage and I
Mhm.
was trying to recover. So there was a lot of self-care going
that's
on
good.
after the divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until a few years later that I had found my now husband. But there was a lot of trying to take care of me and getting
that's
my
good.
heart back right with God because I had been so far from him for so long. So I needed to get my relationship back on track with God first. And then it's just funny how it all, and get God's timing, again, God's timing, because we went to the same church. We went to the same services and we never saw each other. And it wasn't till a few years down after that I bumped into him. And then after that first time, I saw him repeatedly, constantly after that. And we became friends for 2 years before we even got engaged. And then obviously I remarried, but
did you go through premarital counseling?
we did. And actually it was a different type because it's for your second marriage.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a different type of book, which was neat because what it does in that second book is it talks about triggers from your first marriage.
That's good.
And how to deal with some of those things. Still working on that because as we know, when you're in an abuse situation, those things don't just magically disappear. So you're constantly still working on things, triggers that may come up, or words, or how you speak to each other, or just trying to work on different ways of navigating each other from our previous marriages.
That's good.
Wow, that just knowing that there's a second marriage care out there is pretty awesome.
I think it's called Saving Your Second Marriage Before It Starts.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I would say for me, this is my, like I said, this is my second marriage. My husband now has been married a couple times before, but we met, it's ironic, family kind of put us together. My sister was married to one of his family members. It's a long story. It's a strange thing. But long story short, I knew of him, he knew of me, but we never really knew each other. But again, then when my ex and I had ended, we started running into each other a little more. And my sister would tell him, I knew the perfect person for you. And I had already known his mom before, and she was like, son, if you don't, date her, you're stupid. So we had, people bringing us together.
That's good.
And so he had already kind of known, he knew my ex-husband. So he knew what I had been dealing with. I knew some of what he had been dealing with. So we had an appreciation for one another. And it was, we don't want to do this anymore. He had had bad relationships. I had had abusive relationship. And we just had an appreciation for one another and a respect for one another. And we talked a lot about what we didn't want, what we didn't want to go through, and how we didn't want to repeat the past. It took a while for me to trust.
Yeah, it's hard.
We took a while to even get married. We were together about 5 years before we even got married. But until then, we didn't merge bank accounts. You just go through those periods that you just don't trust.
Right.
Even though I know my husband is an amazing man, I didn't see it at the time. It took me a while to just kind of to get a clear vision of it all, right? And what it was supposed to be.
That's really good. I know for me, my first husband actually passed away, so I was a widow. And then I met my current husband. And for me, what I loved about this new relationship was we communicated a lot. And some of the things we did Simbas, we joke, we took it twice because we didn't do it the right way the first time. I guess, I don't know. He says we failed it. I don't believe it. But anyway, we took it twice. But anyway, that was good. But the other things we did was the 5 love languages. We learned our love languages. And that's very important even now in our marriage, now that we've been married a little over 2 years. And there's another one I call the apology language, learning how to say you're sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
And Sorry Isn't Good Enough, I think it's the book. It's an excellent book because, it does make a difference how you apologize.
Yeah, it does.
And what I love about this is we both were broken from our previous marriages. And we learned about each other and how to respect one another. We knew, well, to be honest with you, we don't like drama. We've had too much drama in our first marriages, so we're happy to be very calm.
Yes.
I joke around. If I want drama, I'll turn on the TV. I don't need it in my life.
Yeah.
So anyway, for me, it took some time because, you always have that in the back of your mind. You're going to compare them against it. It's just how it is. They say you can't compare, but you do. Because you've lived most of your life, or at least for me, I lived most of my life with this person, and to see their ways, their brokenness, and now to see each other's in the new marriage brokenness. But, I just find that what I did differently this time is I sought God first. I made sure this is who God wanted me to marry because I didn't want to do that again. And I'm grateful that, God has been good. And to be honest with you, I look back, just like we've been talking about, we look back, we see things now that we wish we had seen back then, but I also see the hand of God through all of it.
Yeah.
I saw that I was protected physically. I saw that I was protected financially. And I was just blown away by just my mind. I have my mind, you know what I mean? It's just amazing. And was I a perfect Christian through it all? No, no such thing.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I had people, like we said, reach out to people when you're going through this. I'm grateful those prayers of all those years of praying and protection. Prayer works, even though we don't see it at the moment, and things may not work out the way we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Things have never worked out the way I've wanted, right?
Right.
But I've seen many times where I see God, it's perfect the way he put it together.
Yeah.
Well, and it's usually when God puts it together, it's so much better.
Absolutely.
That's good. There's no imperfection in it. It's his perfect will for us.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, like you were talking about your spouse, my first husband passed away as well. But I think for me, it was about forgiveness too.
Oh, yeah.
I had to, and I still have moments, but he and I, after years of separation, we got to where we could communicate about our daughter.
Mm.
And he was in one state and I'm here in Florida, and he would call and we would talk about her, and I had to forgive him for me.
That's good.
Yeah.
I had to have that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to be able to forgive him for me. And when he passed away, my daughter and I were there when he passed away. At his funeral service, and again, forgiveness was for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had to forgive him, and let go.
Yeah.
Before I could begin again.
I think that's a hard one. Even though I'm out of the abuse, my children still live it every day with their dad because there's still custody involved. But I think forgiveness is not a one and done.
No.
I personally have forgiven my ex, but it's still a work in progress.
There you go.
And I'm still taking it one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that with everything that's happened to me in my past.
Mm-hmm.
I literally take it one day at a time. And I feel like that's all I can do at this point to get through each day.
And that's what God says. Very biblical there. Take a day at a time. And forgiveness is so important. We say this a lot. And when I was going through the healing during all this recovering from all that I went through, whatever, the first thing God dealt with me on was forgiveness. And that began my spiritual journey of growing even more, because when we hold back forgiveness, it can root into bitterness.
Right.
And we don't want to get bitter. As Christians, we're supposed to forgive. It's not easy, but we have to get to that point. Yeah. I remember when I was separated one time from my first husband, he said, "When will you forgive me?" I said, "I have forgiven you, but I'm not going to let you back into my life to abuse me."
Right.
You have to have that boundary as well.
Yes.
Let's stick with that boundary. Now, you brought up something about your children. Did you ever have them go through any counseling or anybody?
So legally, both parents have to agree.
Okay.
Until the children are 18, obviously, then they can do what they want. But no, I have requested in the past that they receive counseling, and the answer was always no.
Well, I also wanted to bring up that, kids are also involved in a lot of these situations. So having them go through counseling is not a bad thing.
No.
And even if, they're not able to go, get them involved in some activities. Sometimes churches, getting them in the youth group or the children's elementary school, that they're learning about God and learning about forgiveness and learning about things, because kids are trying to process what's going on.
Yes.
Growing up in a family where there was abuse, I could see it. I recognized it. Yeah. And I was grateful that now I look back that I was in church and I saw people that I wanted to be like. I saw healthy relationships.
It's worth.
Yes.
It's, it's self-worth.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, we struggle with it, and it escalates. And you just don't want your children
Right.
you want them to know they're worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kids will internalize. So I just pray, that the children, those of domestic violence or any kind of situation, that they realize that it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
a lot of them will internalize. Growing up, I thought if I was a better kid, this wouldn't have happened. That's a lot of what, because kids think it's all about them, not in a bad way, because that's just how they're processing the world, I guess. So getting help for them is not a bad thing. And if there's not that consensus to, I just encourage church, like I said,
Right.
just to be able to have positive people in their life, get them in sports, get them where they understand teamwork and things like that.
Yeah, I know in my situation with my kids, they were so controlled that there was only certain things they could do and be allowed to do. So when I pulled away and actually got a divorce, I put them full throttle in everything. It was church, it was small groups, it was sports, it was anything that I could get them involved in so that they could see relationships and how people work together and teamwork. And, it's been a great, I feel, distraction for them as well, because when they go back, they know that this is how their life is going to be at their dad's. But then when they're with me, it's totally different.
Yeah. And covering them in prayer.
Oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
you know you do.
Yeah.
When they have to go to, and praying that the spouses or
Praying for your spouses that's a tough one too.
right.
Yeah.
Pray for them.
But we
because-
should be,
Yeah, because they need help too. We all
do.
right?
We all need help.
Pray for all of us.
They're
right?
broken or
Yeah.
they wouldn't be where they're at. And
Right.
I said, for myself was a little different. He was in one state, I was in another. But with my daughter, I felt like I had to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
I had to keep her close.
Yep.
She had outside activities, and she was a beautiful dancer,
Mm-hmm.
So I was there. I made sure I showed up.
That's great.
I tried to probably overcompensate for his lack of, involvement.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Well, I wanted to share a few statistics just on domestic violence to kind of give it a perspective to
Okay.
people. So there's 3.3 million estimated number of children in the U.S. each year that witness violence against their mother or female caretaker by a family member.
Wow.
40 to 60% of men who abuse women were also abused children. So that's why they need help too. They need to get anybody who's grown up in that. I pray that they will just get help. 1 in 5 number of teenager girls said they had been in a relationship where the boyfriend threatened violence or self-harm if a breakup was to occur. 85% of domestic violence victims are women. And it's just so many. And the age group that has the most number of violence is 18 to 24-year-olds. At least the last stats are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's so young.
Yeah, well, see, they don't know. And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of risk factors. And I'm going to be putting on the website some of this information for people to look at. Some documents I found online, domestic violence website. And so people can read up on that. They also have information there for help. They have the hotline like we talked about, because this is a big thing. This is something that a lot of people aren't talking. And actually, the stats are only for those who have actually reported it, because a lot of women will not report the violence.
Yeah.
They don't call the police. They don't. So we pray that, people who are listening, if you're in that situation, it's okay to get help.
Yeah.
You are more important than that situation, right? Your life, there's so much God has in store for you, and you don't have to live like that. You are worth more
Yeah.
than what you think you are.
Yes.
Sometimes we get down and we believe the lies of the enemy,
Yes.
that we're not worth it and we won't have anything better. And that's a lie. We're living proof of that, right?
Yes.
That there is better.
Yes, there is.
So I thank you guys for being here today. We have shared a lot and being very transparent with people. I appreciate that, because I think that so many people need to hear this, that there's others that have gone through it. We have gone through it. And if you're going through it, we pray that you get help, you seek support, because you're valuable. And there's so much more for you that God has planned for your life. And so I pray.
And never give up.
Never give up.
Never give
That's
up.
really good.
Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. And that was my go-to verse
That's good.
back when I was in gymnastics. And look at me now.
Yeah.
Many years later, I have been using that verse my whole life, and never give up. You can do it. It's going to be scary. You're not going to want to, but it's going to be the best choice for you and if you have children in your life.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The go-to verse of mine was Jeremiah 29:11.
Yeah.
That was a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and
Plans for you. Yeah.
plans for you. If you don't see it, You can't see it when you're going through
Right.
it, but when you get to the other side, you realize that it's so much better.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I want to encourage those who are listening today, if you're going through a very tumultuous situation, domestic violence, that you would seek help.
Yes.
That once again, we've said it over and over that you're valuable and there's so much more that God wants to do through you. So I pray that you would seek counsel, seek help because you are loved. And as Heather, you said, don't give up.
Don't give up.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for listening. For more information, visit www.suicideloss.org. That's suicideloss.org. This presentation was not intended as a substitute for professional care. Please see a counselor or physician for your individual needs. Subscribe and like so that you never miss an episode.